Hey guys, tonight we're donning our floral aprons and venturing into the retro culinary wilderness, otherwise known as the kitchen of a 1950s American housewife. Yes, we're talking about the legendary era of jello salads, mystery casseroles, and casseroles that were also mysteries. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy this. Leave a comment with the weirdest thing you've ever tried to cook after 10 p.m. because that's the energy we're channeling tonight. Now, dim the lights, switch on a fan for that vintage TV static background hum, and let's get comfortable. 1. Maybe slip into something cozy, preferably not an actual crinoline, unless you're committed to the bit. Let's pause for a moment. Have you ever wondered what a 1950s housewife actually did in the kitchen all day? Was it really all pearls and pie crusts? Did they really have to make 3 different kinds of salad, none of which involved actual lettuce? How many cans of cream of mushroom soup can a single person open in a week before the neighbors get concerned? And if everything was homemade, why did so many meals start with just adding water and hope for the best? What was breakfast like, besides radioactive orange juice and bacon that could double as roof shingles? Did anyone actually enjoy tomato aspic? Or was it just a Cold War tactic? And most importantly, did the kids survive snack time, or are they still missing somewhere inside a jello mold? And now, congratulations, you've just woken up at 1956. The kitchen is linoleum, the air smells faintly of wet spam, and your job today is to cook like your marriage depends on it. Good luck. The day begins before dawn, when you shuffle to the kitchen in fuzzy slippers and start the sacred percolator, an infernal contraption that gurgles and spits like it's summoning the spirit of caffeine itself. You don't make coffee so much as wrestle with it, squinting at the instructions and praying you don't end up with something that tastes like boiled pennies. All this just to fuel the breakfast marathon. Let's set the scene. It's still dark outside. The kitchen is awash in a pale bluish gloom, illuminated only by the dim light of the oven clock, if you're lucky enough to have an oven with a clock. You move on autopilot, arms reaching for the familiar glass pot and the dented tin of Maxwell House. Already, the stakes are high. One wrong move, and you'll end up with a brew so strong it could strip paint, or so weak it tastes like the tears of someone who's given up. The smell of ground coffee hangs in the air, sharp and hopeful, promising a miracle that will drag your eyelids up and your mood out of the gutter. As the percolator comes to life, it sounds less like an appliance and more like a disgruntled plumbing system threatening mutiny. There's a delicate art to percolator coffee. The water must be measured, the grounds leveled, the lid snapped on just right. There's always that quiet terror as you plug it in, wondering if today's the day it finally explodes. Every cup is a gamble. Sometimes the result is hot, strong, and borderline drinkable. Other times it's a bitter soup with the texture of river silt. In the 1950s, this was just normal. Everyone you knew started their day with a little bit of caffeine and a lot of existential dread. Let's not forget, there are other mouths to caffeinate. Maybe your husband stumbles in, grunting, expecting a steaming cup handed over like a peace offering. Maybe you've got company, your mother-in-law, perhaps, with opinions on everything from your carpet to your coffee strength. The pressure is on. There's a certain choreography to pouring a cup. Hold the handle, avoid the spout's dribble, fill each cup without overfilling. The clink of porcelain cups is the unofficial anthem of morning. You pour yourself the first one, brave the taste, and decide whether it's passable or requires a strategic addition of evaporated milk and 3 spoonfuls of sugar. Outside, the rest of America is doing the exact same thing. You wonder how many other women are locked in mortal combat with their percolators right now, united by the shared hope that this cup will be better than the last. Percolator coffee isn't just a drink, it's an act of faith. And if you spill grounds on the counter, well, that's just seasoning for tomorrow. Now, let's address the flavor. Percolator coffee in the 50s had a unique profile, somewhere between scorched earth and weak tea, with occasional undertones of metallic surprise. There was no Starbucks to complain to, just the family. Who would drink it anyway? The ritual of coffee is less about pleasure, more about survival. You're not savoring the subtle notes. You're gulping it down as armor for the long day ahead. In this world, caffeine is less a luxury and more a desperate act of self-preservation. And so, as you sip your too hot, too bitter, too important morning brew, you take a deep breath, gaze out the window at the still sleeping street, and tell yourself, you are ready. Ready for eggs, for bacon, for chaos. Ready to face breakfast with the full, jittery power of 1950s percolator roulette. If the coffee is terrible, it's okay. At least it's hot. And as every housewife knows, in this kitchen, sometimes that's all you need. You're making eggs. Always eggs. Maybe scrambled, maybe fried, maybe just slightly burnt, because the smoke alarm is the real morning bell. Toast is scorched, bacon is crisped to a geological formation, and orange juice glows with an unnatural hue. It's a meal, technically. No one has time to enjoy it. The day's second act begins with a bang, or more accurately, a sizzle. The kitchen is alive with sound. Eggs hitting hot metal, the steady crackle of bacon slowly transforming from meat to mineral, and the urgent ticking of a timer that may or may not have been wound correctly. You shuffle from pan to toaster, from fridge to counter, caught in the kind of time loop usually reserved for people being punished by Greek gods. Every movement is muscle memory. Crack the eggs. Try not to drop a shell in. If you do, just fish it out and pretend it never happened. No one is looking. Everyone is busy pretending to read the newspaper or lacing shoes. This is the 1950s breakfast rush. If you're lucky, the eggs will come out soft and fluffy. If not, they're extra protein. The bacon, meanwhile, is cooked until it could legally be classified as a sedimentary rock. You watch the fat render off, popping and fizzing, painting the stovetop with little Jackson Pollock splatters. Some people prefer it chewy, but that's a fantasy. Here, bacon is only ever one texture, sharp. There are house rules. Bacon must never be limp, eggs must never be cold, and toast must never ever be edible without scraping. Toast, by the way, isn't really toasted. It's carbonized. You fish it out of the toaster with a fork, knowing full well you shouldn't. But hey, you're already risking your life every time you step into this kitchen. The juice situation is its own adventure. Forget fresh squeezed. That's for magazine covers and people with too much time on their hands. Here, orange juice comes from a frozen can, mixed with tap water and stirred with a battered metal spoon. The final color glows somewhere between neon and warning sign. Is it orange? Is it yellow? Is it secretly radioactive? Doesn't matter. You pour it into glasses, shaped like miniature skyscrapers, and hope it's close enough to actual fruit to fool the family's immune systems. The table is set in the same precise way every morning. Forks to the left, knives to the right. Napkins folded in a way that only looks effortless after a decade of practice. A pat of butter, which will not melt, stares accusingly from the side of the plate. Everyone assembles at the table in various states of consciousness. Dad's already in his suit, kids in their school clothes, you in whatever passed for sleepwear plus a housecoat. Conversation is minimal. The newspaper rustles, someone coughs. You try to remember if you've already poured the milk or if you're just imagining it. The dog eyes everyone's bacon with a mix of longing and existential despair. There's no time to enjoy any of it. The clock is the real tyrant here, ticking ever closer to school buses and carpool departures. Kids wolf down their food, chasing it with a gulp of juice and a desperate hope they won't be late. Dad checks his watch, mutters something about traffic, and shovels in a forkful of eggs with all the joy of a condemned man eating his last meal. You're left with a plate of crumbs, a table smeared with butter, and a strange sense that time is folding in on itself. And just as you think you might get a quiet minute, the smoke alarm lets out a gentle beep, a reminder that yes, you have once again achieved the perfect balance of slightly burnt breakfast and total chaos. The kitchen is a battlefield. You survey the damage, wipe toast crumbs from your slippers, and wonder, not for the first time, if anyone in history has ever actually enjoyed their breakfast. The truth is, breakfast in the 1950s isn't about pleasure. It's about fuel. It's about showing up, getting through, and hoping the next meal will be quieter. You take a last sip of lukewarm coffee, stare out the window at the rising sun, and prepare for the avalanche of dishes that's already waiting. Congratulations. You've survived the first crisis of the day, only 3 more meals to go. Cereal is the battleground of generations. Will it be something so sweet it could double as insulation? Or the unyielding crunch of grape nuts, which double as dental work? Every box comes with a toy and a sugar crash by 8:30 a.m. Let's be honest. Nothing in the 1950s household stirs up more heated debate than breakfast cereal. Forget politics, religion, or the correct way to hang toilet paper. The real lines are drawn between Team Sugar and Team Fiber. Your pantry is an archaeological dig of half-empty boxes, each promising a better start to the day and a different kind of dental bill. On one side, you have the sugar bombs, Fruit Loops, Sugar Smacks, Frosted Flakes, and that odd one with the cartoon kangaroo on the front. These cereals are more science experiment than food, each flake lacquered in a crystalline armor of sugar, so thick you can hear the crunch 3 rooms away. The colors are unnatural. Radioactive reds, glowing blues, pastel greens, each one a shade you don't find in nature unless something has gone terribly wrong. Pouring milk on them is like performing a chemical reaction. The liquid turns pink or green before your eyes. And the taste? It's like eating hope, regret, and 23 grams of sucrose. Children, of course, worship these cereals. The more cavities they cause, the more coveted the prize inside. But lurking in the back of the pantry, like a stern aunt at a birthday party, is grape nuts. The box is aggressively plain, its promises muted. Energy, fiber, possibly food. The cereal itself looks like gravel, tastes like disappointment, and requires at least 20 minutes of soaking before your molars can make a dent. Eating a bowl of grape nuts is less a meal and more a declaration of personal strength. You tell yourself you're making healthy choices. Really, you're just auditioning for a future as a rock crusher. The kids avoid it like it's haunted. You, on the other hand, try to sell them on its wholesome benefits, knowing full well it's an acquired taste, like tax season or kale. The morning drama unfolds like a low-budget soap opera. A child appears, clutching a box of the most obnoxiously bright cereal on the shelf. You sigh, reach for the plain stuff, and begin negotiations. How about a nice, hearty cereal this morning? You suggest, as if grape nuts is anything but a test of willpower. The child counters, wielding the toy inside as leverage. There are tears, bargains, and the quiet threat of oatmeal if no agreement can be reached. Eventually, a compromise is made. Half a bowl of sugar cereal, topped with a guilt-driven sprinkle of something brown and unyielding. This is parenting in its purest form. Trickery, and surrender. And let's talk about the toys. Every box of cereal promises a treasure, a plastic ring, a decoder, a tiny submarine that really dives if you're willing to fill your milk with baking soda. The toy is always at the bottom, buried beneath 1,000 jagged flakes. This ensures the child will pour out the entire contents onto the table in search of glory, leaving you to sweep up a drift of fruity shrapnel before lunch. Some mornings, it feels like the prize is less for the kid and more for you. A tiny reward for enduring another day of crunch, crunch, crunch. By 8:30 a.m., the sugar kicks in. The children ricochet off the walls, speaking in tongues, eyes wide with the feverish light of the truly overstimulated. Grape nuts kids, meanwhile, stare into the middle distance, contemplating the long journey ahead. You finish your own bowl, jaw aching, wondering if adulthood is just learning to accept a little disappointment with your milk. And so, the great cereal debate rages on. Will it be the fleeting joy of sugar, followed by a crash that lasts until lunchtime? Or the stoic endurance of fiber, promising health and regularity and the faint taste of cardboard? No matter what you choose, one truth remains. The toys are always more fun than the cereal. And sometimes, that's enough to get everyone through the morning, teeth intact or otherwise. Your mission: assemble 5 lunches with nothing but bologna, white bread, a single slice of government cheese, and hope. Add a bruised apple for nutrition and a note with a smiley face so the school knows you care. Bonus points for sneaking in a thermos of tomato soup. Welcome to the great 1950s Lunchbox assembly line, where nutritional science is less eat the rainbow and more does it fit in a square of wax paper. The kitchen table is your battlefield. 5 battered metal lunchboxes, each one sporting the face of a slightly unsettling cartoon mascot, are lined up like tiny armored tanks ready for deployment. You, armed with a butter knife and a weary determination, set to work. First up, the star of the show, bologna. There are entire cold-cut kingdoms, but bologna reigns supreme. It's pink, it's glossy, and it smells faintly of existential crisis and preservatives. You slap a slice onto white bread so pillowy it could double as packing material, then add a square of American cheese, individually wrapped in plastic, because nothing says fresh like a shelf life longer than some marriages. The cheese doesn't melt, bend, or really participate in the sandwich. It's more of a silent witness. Maybe, if you're feeling wild, you'll add a swipe of yellow mustard or a dab of mayonnaise, but this is the era of moderation. Too many condiments and the sandwich risks collapse before noon. Now for the apple. Not just any apple, but the bruised, slightly sad specimen at the bottom of the fruit bowl. You examine it, wipe it on your apron, and hope it will pass muster. Fruit in the lunchbox is like an insurance policy. No one wants it, but everyone feels better knowing it's there. Sometimes you consider swapping it for a handful of grapes or, in a moment of true rebellion, a banana. But bananas are risky. By lunchtime, they're a sticky, odorous memory, haunting the sandwich with their ghostly essence. With the sandwich and fruit in place, you move on to the snack. The 1950s snack landscape is a minefield of crinkly wrappers and questionable ingredients. Potato chips are the go-to. Salty, oily, and guaranteed to leave a grease shadow on the wax paper. For dessert, maybe a couple of store-bought cookies, which taste like sugar and unresolved family issues. If you're feeling like Supermom, there might be a homemade brownie, but let's be honest, the odds are low. Most days, you're lucky if you can find the last unbroken saltine in the box. Every lunchbox needs a drink. Enter the thermos, a vessel of hot, tomato-red soup, sealed so tightly it requires the strength of a minor Olympian to open. You pour the Campbell's in, screw on the lid, and pray it doesn't leak, explode, or develop sentience by noon. Milk in a waxy carton is the fallback. But everyone knows by 12:05 it'll be the exact temperature of body heat and slightly curdled. The finishing touch? A napkin, folded with the kind of maternal love that borders on desperate hope. And a handwritten note. Have a great day. You scrawl, adding a smiley face or a cartoon sun, as if your handwriting alone could stave off playground betrayals or the horror of Mystery Meat Thursday. In your mind, you're sending a little piece of yourself along, a talisman against bullies, loneliness, and the cold, sticky reality of a lukewarm bologna sandwich. As the lunchboxes snap shut, you hear the approaching stampede of children, each one prepared to immediately complain about their meal. Again? They whine, poking the bologna like it might be alive. You offer them your best smile and a warning glare. It's that, or last night's meatloaf surprise. They relent. You've won the day, but you know tomorrow's bologna battle will return. And so, with the lunches stacked by the door, you breathe a sigh of relief. Another daily miracle, accomplished with nothing but sodium, carbs, and stubbornness. Because in the 1950s, lunch wasn't about variety, it was about survival. And in your kitchen, survival always comes with a side of bologna. No dishwasher, no problem. Well, actually, it's a huge problem. You've got a small mountain of greasy plates, a soggy dish rag, and a soap that promises gentle hands but actually smells like anxiety. This is your upper body workout for the week. Let's be honest. In the 1950s, automatic dishwasher was less a household staple and more a futuristic dream, like jetpacks or a child who voluntarily eats their vegetables. Here, in your sunny, linoleum-clad kitchen, the only dishwashing unit is you, your calloused hands, and a relentless sense of duty. The post-breakfast battlefield sprawls before you, cereal bowls crusted with concrete-like oats, juice glasses streaked with a suspicious orange hue, and a parade of greasy pans, each one a monument to bacon's victory over cardiovascular health. The ritual begins with water. You crank the tap, waiting for the temperature to reach scalding but survivable. There's always a gamble. Will today's hot water last? Or will it abandon you halfway through, leaving your hands plunged into a polar plunge of despair? You fill the sink, watching the suds build into a fluffy mountain, dish soap-scented spring meadow, which, as it turns out, smells nothing like spring and everything like mild panic. It claims to keep your hands soft as silk, but after 1 week, you could sand a floor with your fingertips. The first dish goes in, and you brace for impact. Soggy bread clings to plates like it's auditioning for a new life as wallpaper paste. Bacon fat forms mysterious patterns on the water's surface, swirling into abstract art you'd rather not interpret. You attack each item with a faded sponge and a battered dish rag, both of which have seen things. You scrape, you scrub, you rinse, over and over, in a rhythm that's almost meditative if you ignore the ache in your shoulders. Every once in a while, you hit a fork with something fossilized on the tines, a leftover from breakfast past. You wonder if you should call in a professional archaeologist, or just give up and throw it away. There's a hierarchy to the washing order. Glasses first, then plates, then, if you still have the will to live, the pans. And heaven help you if someone sneaks in a pot from last night's dinner, crusted over like a geological time capsule. Soak it, you mutter, shoving it to the back of the line, fully aware it will now soak for the next 12 hours, haunting you like an unpaid bill. Meanwhile, the rest of the house whirls on. Kids run through, tracking in dirt. The phone rings, and you answer with a slippery, soapy hand, making every conversation a test of dexterity and restraint. Maybe your husband appears, glances at the sea of suds, and says something truly helpful, like, "Need any help?" before disappearing at the speed of light. You remind yourself this is your moment of zen, your own Olympic event. If the Olympics included wringing out grey dishwater and praying the silverware doesn't slip to the bottom and slice your finger open, let's not overlook the drying phase. There's no heated dry cycle, just a stack of dish towels, each one embroidered with optimistic slogans and stained by past defeats. You stack dishes on the counter, hoping the air will do its work. Inevitably, someone will come in for a glass of milk and select the wettest cup available. It's tradition. Finally, you stand back, survey your shining, if slightly streaky, empire, and realize you have achieved the impossible. The dishes are done. Your arms ache, your hands are pruned, and you've acquired the forearms of a prize fighter. You survived another round with the mountain of plates, armed only with grit, soap, and sheer will. And as you hang the dish towel to dry, you know it won't be long before breakfast is a memory, and lunch comes storming in, hungry and ready to destroy your hard-won peace. Because in the 1950s kitchen, dishwashing isn't just a chore, it's a battle, and somehow you're still standing. The kids are gone, the husband is at work, and it's finally time for your own breakfast. One piece of toast, some homemade jam, and the first quiet moment you'll get all day. It lasts 3 minutes, tops, before the phone rings. This is the legendary, elusive second breakfast, not recognized by science, ignored by nutritionists, and cherished by everyone who's ever made it through a morning school run with sanity mostly intact. You slide the last lunchbox out the door, close the kitchen door with a sigh that's half exhaustion, half victory. And finally, for the first time since sunrise, the house is silent. Not truly silent, there's always the hum of the fridge, the clank of radiators, and the faint, suspicious sound of the dog investigating someone's shoe, but silent enough. You cue up the toaster, which is a relic from another era, chrome, heavy, possibly engineered by NASA. You drop in a single slice of white bread and watch it descend into the heating element with the solemnity of a tiny, gluten-based ceremony. The act of toasting is a ritual, a brief, sacred window where you can stand in the soft morning light and remember what peace tastes like. The aroma is nostalgic, warm, slightly yeasty, a little bit like hope. If you're lucky, the toast will pop up golden and even. If not, well, you scrape off the blackened bits and call it rustic. You reach for the jam, a jar of something homemade, or at least purchased at a church bazaar by someone who claims to know the secret to perfect preserves. Strawberry, maybe, or that slightly runny grape jelly that stains everything it touches. There's a moment of satisfaction as the knife slides through the jam, spreading it over the toast in an uneven layer that would horrify the magazine editors but feels like self-care. This isn't just breakfast. It's a love letter to yourself in edible form. You sit at the kitchen table, elbows on the formica, eyes closed, and bite in. For one shining moment, you're not a housewife, a short-order cook, or the family logistics manager. You're just a person eating toast. The world narrows to the sound of your chewing, the tang of sweet fruit, and the warmth of the sun through the curtains. If heaven exists, it's probably carb-based. But peace in the 1950s kitchen is fragile, built on the shifting sands of family schedules and household demands. 3 minutes, sometimes 5 if you're truly blessed, and the phone rings. It's never good news. Maybe it's your neighbor, ready to deliver a blow-by-blow of her morning. You'll never guess what the milkman did. Maybe it's your mother, just checking in to see if you've heard the latest. Or, worst of all, it's a telemarketer offering you a new vacuum you can't afford. You cradle the phone against your shoulder, toast in one hand, jam threatening to slide off the crust and onto your only clean blouse. As you nod, murmur, and attempt not to get drawn into a 45-minute saga about Mrs. Higgins's runaway cat, you look longingly at the fading warmth of your breakfast. This is adulthood, cold toast and hot gossip. Eventually you hang up, salvage what's left of your toast, and notice the clock. Your me time has evaporated. There's laundry to fold, beds to make, a grocery list that reads like a novel, and approximately 1,400 other tasks calling your name. The second breakfast window has closed. But as you rinse off your plate and consider making another cup of coffee, you feel a small triumph. You carved out 3 minutes of quiet from the jaws of chaos, and no one can take that away from you. Not even Mrs. Higgins' cat. So you square your shoulders, wipe the jam from your sleeve, and head back into the fray. Because if there's one thing the 1950s housewife knows, it's how to find joy in tiny, buttery victories, no matter how fleeting they are. Time to organize the leftovers, which means playing Tupperware Tetris. Is that yesterday's tuna casserole or last month's chicken surprise? You don't know. Nobody knows. The real surprise is whether it'll kill you. This is the sacred hour of fridge management. A job that sounds simple but, in practice, requires the deductive skills of Sherlock Holmes and the bravery of someone who regularly ignores expiration dates. The refrigerator door swings open with a groan, revealing a chilly cave filled with stacked plastic containers in every shade of pastel, each one promising nourishment or doom. In the 1950s, Tupperware isn't just a storage solution. It's a lifestyle, a status symbol, and sometimes a crypt. You kneel before the frosty shelves, arms deep in a jungle of mismatched lids, condensation, and cold, silent judgment. Some containers are perfectly clear, their contents glowing in mysterious neon colors never found in nature. Others are opaque, which adds a thrilling element of surprise. You prod a few with the caution of a bomb squad technician. Was this the ham from Sunday, or is it something else entirely? You pop a lid. A whiff of nostalgia and potential botulism greets you. If it smells mostly like onions and regret, it's probably safe. If it hisses, you close it fast and pretend it never happened. Tupperware in this era is new, exciting, and multiplying at an alarming rate. There are stacks for every occasion. A rainbow of burp seal lids that make a satisfying pop when closed, assuming you can ever find the right one. And you never can. The universe of food storage is one of chaos. You match a square lid to a round base, attempt to force a rectangle onto an oval, and finally surrender, stacking them precariously in a leaning tower of culinary Babel. You know that, at some point, gravity will claim its prize and avalanche half the fridge onto your toes. Let's talk about the contents. Leftovers, in the 1950s, are not a trend, they're a necessity. Food waste is a sin. Creativity is survival. So you save everything, from 3 spoons of green beans to half a potato to the corner of a pie that's more crust than filling. Mystery meat, now encased in a shimmering film of gelatin, is catalogued alongside jello salads, last week's baked beans, and one lone hot dog, stiff as a ruler, just waiting to be reincarnated as lunch. The unspoken rule is simple. If you can't remember when you cooked it, you reheat it for your husband and watch him closely for signs of distress. The Tupperware shuffle isn't just about organization. It's also a high-stakes negotiation with the past. Every time you reach for a container, you're haunted by the ghost of meals gone wrong. You find the tuna noodle casserole, the one nobody liked but everyone politely ate, and wonder if it will ever disappear. You find potatoes that have begun to sprout new ambitions. Sometimes, a casserole has fused with its container, forming a bond stronger than most marriages. This is where you earn your stripes as a housewife, making sure nothing goes to waste, even if it means risking mild digestive peril. You rotate the oldest stuff to the front, praying someone will eat it before it becomes sentient. You throw out the absolute worst offenders, hiding the evidence deep in the trash so no one can accuse you of waste. And when the Tupperware is finally washed, dried, and stacked once more, you feel a small, strange pride. You have not been defeated by leftovers, at least not yet. You close the fridge, stack the empty containers with the rest, and know tomorrow the game will begin again. Because in this kitchen, organization isn't just about tidiness, it's about survival, mystery, and the hope that maybe, just maybe, tonight's casserole will be good enough to remember. Or, at the very least, not deadly. Your meal planning begins with a sacred text. The local church cookbook, filled with recipes that start with open one can and end with top with crushed potato chips. Every casserole is a dare, and every salad contains at least one ingredient that shouldn't legally be in a salad. This isn't just any cookbook, it's a spiral-bound artifact of small-town ambition and community pride, lovingly assembled by a battalion of church ladies who view paprika as an act of rebellion. The pages are already stained with generations of fingerprints, Crisco, and the occasional tear. Flipping through, you're greeted by recipes with names like Heavenly Hash, Surprise Loaf, and Mystery Pie. Each dish promises convenience, comfort, and the thinly veiled threat of digestive uncertainty. You settle at the kitchen table, pencil in hand, ready to draft your meal plan for the week. You consult the index, which is more wishful thinking than logic. Casseroles comes before cake, as if the book knows where your real priorities lie. Half the dishes seem to require nothing but canned soup, elbow macaroni, and an unwavering faith that the oven will do the rest. You make a list, but it quickly turns into a scavenger hunt for items like pimento cheese spread, maraschino cherries, and cornflakes. For topping, not eating. The real joy of the church cookbook is the wild improvisation. Ingredients are vague, butter the size of an egg. Instructions are breezy, bake until done. And measurements are more of a suggestion than a law. Some recipes are suspiciously short: mix, pour, bake, pray. Others go on for pages, including step-by-step directions for boiling water and reminders to call Mrs. Peterson if confused. You make mental notes to never, ever attempt the aspic ring or anything with the word loaf unless you want to see the children cry. Meal planning in the 1950s is a logistical operation that would terrify modern meal prep influencers. You're planning not just for one meal, but for a continuous stream of hungry mouths, impromptu guests, and the ever-present risk of potluck invitations. Monday's dinner needs to become Tuesday's leftovers and Thursday's miracle soup. Every recipe is chosen not just for taste, but for its ability to stretch, freeze, and reappear disguised as something new. There's an undercurrent of competition too. Somewhere in town, another housewife is also leafing through her church cookbook, determined to out-casserole everyone at next month's luncheon. Will you go bold with the Chicken Divine, which features an entire can of condensed mushroom soup, or play it safe with Macaroni Salad Supreme, whose only supreme quality is its ability to multiply in the fridge? The casserole arms race is real, and your honor is on the line. As you circle recipes, you reflect on the peculiar church salad chapter, a lawless land where salad means anything that can be suspended in jello or held together by mayonnaise. Pineapple chunks, mini marshmallows, and shredded carrots all commingle in pastel oblivion, waiting for their debut at the next family gathering. Some of these salads defy both God and science, but you dutifully copy the shopping list and remind yourself that sometimes the true flavor is community spirit, with a hint of lime gelatin. By the end of your planning session, your meal plan reads like a Mad Lib. Tonight, tuna noodle casserole, serve with canned peas. Tomorrow, mystery chicken bake, top with crushed chips. You close the cookbook, confident that whatever happens, you'll have dinner on the table, a new casserole to judge, and a story to tell. In the end, the church cookbook isn't just a meal planner. It's a survival guide, a community yearbook, and a gentle reminder that in the 1950s kitchen, every meal is a leap of faith. Off to the store, armed with a coupon book, a list the length of the Magna Carta, and a handbag big enough to fend off wild raccoons. Grocery shopping is a full-contact sport. Bonus points for getting back with all your green stamps. The first challenge is just getting out the door. In the 1950s, you don't simply throw on sweatpants and call it a day. No, you don real clothes, perhaps a skirt and blouse, maybe even pearls if you're feeling fancy. Your shoes, naturally, have heels. They are not designed for comfort, agility, or survival, but for the dangerous ritual of keeping up appearances in the produce aisle. You give yourself a final once-over in the hall mirror. Lipstick. Just in case you run into Mrs. Henderson, who once went to the store in curlers and was never seen again. You take stock of your weapons. The grocery list, painstakingly assembled from a week's worth of meal plans and desperate scribbles. A fistful of coupons you clipped from the Sunday paper, and your trusty handbag, which could double as a self-defense device in case of stampeding shoppers or the sudden appearance of a rogue can of condensed milk. Into the car you go, assuming you're lucky enough to have one. If not, you'll wrangle bags onto the bus, perfecting the balancing act of dignity and bulk purchase economy. The grocery store itself is a fluorescent-lit coliseum where every shopper is a potential rival, and the clerks are judges in a game you never quite understand the rules to. You grab a cart, its front wheel forever stuck in a leftward drift, and begin your circuit. The produce section is your first test, rows of apples, potatoes, and tomatoes that have been waxed to within an inch of their lives. You squeeze a few, pretending you can tell the difference between ripe and cosmetic deception. Bananas are green, grapes come with an unexpected side of fruit flies. And the lettuce is a gamble you only make if company is coming. Onward to the canned goods aisle, where you hunt for bargains like a big game tracker in high heels. Your coupon book is your shield and sword, but only if you can match the tiny print on your slips with the endless parade of tin labels. There's an art to shopping with coupons. You feel triumphant as you snag a deal, only to realize you bought 12 cans of creamed corn and forgot the milk. Every victory is bittersweet and slightly confusing. The other shoppers are no help. Mrs. Jensen eyes you warily as you reach for the last loaf of Wonder Bread. Mr. Carlson blocks the aisle with a cart the size of a small sedan, consulting his wife, who is holding court by the Campbell's soup display. You try to look purposeful, but in reality, you're just hoping no one notices you've circled the store twice and still can't find the maraschino cherries. There's a special anxiety reserved for the meat counter. You squint at pork chops, analyze hamburger prices, and debate whether the family pack of chicken is worth wrestling into your freezer. The butcher gives you a nod. A secret society of the tired and the thrifty. Sometimes you feel brave enough to try something new, but most days it's safest to stick to the script. Tonight, meatloaf. Tomorrow, something that can be reheated. As you round the corner toward checkout, you grab the essentials: bread, milk, eggs, coffee, butter, plus whatever the kids begged for this week, and whatever you impulsively tossed in to feel alive. You collect your green stamps, tucking them into your purse with the solemnity of a medieval scribe. Later, you'll paste them into a book, dreaming of someday cashing them in for a toaster, a lamp, or a vacation to anywhere but the grocery store. Back in the car, you shed your heels and rub your feet, inventory your spoils, and sigh with relief. The groceries are in the trunk, the coupons have been vanquished, and you live to shop another day. Grocery shopping in the 1950s isn't just a chore, it's a battle, a performance, and occasionally a test of how many cans you can carry without losing your mind or your green stamps. You stare at rows of canned peas, wax beans, and carrots cut into suspiciously uniform cubes. Sometimes you gamble with a bag of frozen spinach, only to discover it's now an unrecognizable green brick. Fresh vegetables are rare, usually reserved for holidays or in-laws. Welcome to the daily struggle of the 1950s housewife, where the quest for produce is less about nutrition and more about survival. Here, the vegetable department isn't so much a garden as it is a shelf of brightly labeled tin canisters, all promising farm-fresh flavor, and all smelling faintly of metallic nostalgia. You know there are vitamins somewhere in there, probably, but mostly you're just hoping for something green to put on the plate, a peace offering to balance out the meatloaf and jello salad. Canned vegetables are the default setting. You can stack them high in your pantry, arrange them in pleasing pyramids, and marvel at their expiration dates, set sometime in a distant, mysterious future. You wield your can opener like a sword, breaking into peas, corn, lima beans, and carrots that have been soaking in a salty brine since the Truman administration. The sound of the lid popping is the anthem of every 5 p.m. dinner rush. But when you pour them out, they emerge limp, slightly grey, and glistening with the kind of sheen not found in nature. Peas are somehow both mushy and oddly crunchy. Carrots are cubed to a geometrical precision that defies all logic. And wax beans, well, wax is the right word. You try to jazz things up. A pat of butter here, a dash of salt there, maybe a sprinkle of paprika if you're feeling bold. Sometimes you mix 2 cans together and call it vegetable medley, but everyone at the table knows it's really desperation in a bowl. Still, canned veggies have their advantages. They never go bad, never judge you, and never bring home dirt on their shoes. And in the era of Cold War preparedness, nothing says ready for anything like a fallout shelter full of Del Monte green beans. Frozen vegetables are the modern alternative, sold with the kind of optimism reserved for magazine advertisements and toothpaste commercials. You buy them in heavy paper bags, their contents rattling with the hard promise of nutrition. The dream is simple: crisp, colorful produce all year round. The reality is frostbitten spinach that thaws into a puddle, string beans that resemble broken shoelaces, and broccoli that collapses into green mush at the mere sight of heat. There's no shame in cooking frozen vegetables. The shame comes when you realize you've overcooked them for the 3rd night in a row, or when you bite into a pea with the icy core of a tiny comet. Every now and then you splurge on something fresh, lettuce, tomatoes, maybe even a bell pepper if you're really living. But fresh vegetables are a luxury, a fleeting visitor in your kitchen, like a wealthy relative who only comes for the holidays and brings their own soap. You treat them with reverence, slicing carefully, serving them raw for maximum effect, and announcing them at dinner as if they're royalty. Tonight we have fresh green beans. The children stare, wary. The husband nods, not quite convinced. By the end of the week, the lettuce has wilted. The tomatoes have gone soft, and you're back to your old friends in the can. In the end, the vegetable dilemma is less about choice and more about compromise. Will it be the certainty of canned, the gamble of frozen, or the fleeting excitement of fresh? No matter what you pick, it will always be served with a side of nostalgia and just a pinch of resignation. And as you scrape the last bit of greenish something onto the plate, you remind yourself, you're not just feeding a family. You're carrying on a proud tradition of making do, getting by, and ensuring no one at the table can ever say, you forgot the vegetables. Even if, deep down, you wish you had. Before anyone thought about salmonella, meat was left to thaw on the counter for hours, sometimes days, while you pondered your options. Will it be meatloaf, meatballs, or just meat surprise again? This is the era of unspoken kitchen gambles, where the rules of food safety are written in pencil and the most advanced bacteria detection device is your nose. You pluck a brick of ground beef from the freezer, set it on a floral dish towel, and let it sweat out its icy secrets while you go about your day. Sometimes, you remember to turn it over for even thawing. Sometimes you forget, and half of it remains stubbornly frozen well past dinner. So you chisel off what you can and call it portion control. The countertop is your culinary runway. By noon, a parade of pale meats is lined up, dripping into sauces and slowly returning to their primordial form. Chicken, pork chops, even the occasional rump roast, each awaiting its fate under your watchful eye. You poke, prod, and occasionally sniff, channeling the combined wisdom of generations before you. If it smells off, you apply the sacred test. Rinse it under cold water, add enough garlic, and declare it fit for human consumption. The concept of cross-contamination has not yet entered the cultural conversation. You chop onions on the same board, confident in the cleansing power of a quick wipe with the corner of your apron. Defrosting is more than a waiting game. It's an act of faith. The freezer is a time capsule, filled with meats wrapped in butcher paper, each package labeled with an indecipherable scrawl. Was this steak from last summer's cookout, or the one before? You squint, try to recall, then decide not to dwell on the details. If it's free of visible frostbite and hasn't developed a second personality, it goes in the dinner pile. Once the thawing ritual is complete, the real decision-making begins. What will tonight's protein become? Meatloaf, the patron saint of 1950s dinners, is always a contender. Ground beef, breadcrumbs, a squirt of ketchup, and enough eggs to glue it all together. You mold it lovingly, if lovingly means smacking it into a loaf pan and muttering prayers that it won't crack and reveal the hidden stash of onions the children claim to despise. If not meatloaf, then perhaps meatballs, rolled and fried, destined for spaghetti, or, if you're feeling adventurous, Swedish style with a can of condensed mushroom soup masquerading as gravy. Then, of course, there's meat surprise, a name whispered only when you have absolutely no idea what you're making. You brown the meat, toss in whatever vegetables survived the week, stir in a mystery packet from the spice drawer, and serve it with a smile that says, "I don't remember this recipe," and neither will you. Sometimes it's delicious, sometimes it's educational. This is the great magic trick of 1950s dinner. No matter what the original intention, the result is always dinner, ready at 6, served with a heap of mashed potatoes and a hope that nobody asks too many questions. Your only true enemy is time. If you forgot to thaw the meat, you scramble for a backup plan, breakfast for dinner, tuna casserole, or, in a moment of desperation, hot dogs and beans. The day ends with you scrubbing yet another round of plates, wondering if anyone appreciated the careful thawing, the skillful seasoning, or the last-minute save with ketchup. As you wipe down the counter, you see tomorrow's meat already sweating through its butcher paper, awaiting its turn on the great stage of domestic cuisine. Because in this house, meat is always on the menu. Defrosted, reimagined, occasionally mysterious, and unfailingly the star of the show. And as you turn out the kitchen lights, you wonder, will tomorrow's dinner be a triumph, a tragedy, or just another meat surprise? Either way, you'll be ready. If you're feeling virtuous, you halve a grapefruit and sprinkle it with sugar. If you're feeling honest, you just eat the sugar and call it a day. Grapefruit is nature's reminder that not all fruit wants to be eaten. It's mid-morning in the 1950s kitchen. The breakfast dishes are drying on the rack. You've survived a phone call with your mother-in-law, and you're at that awkward hour where it's too early for lunch but too late for more coffee, unless you're truly living dangerously. Enter the grapefruit, the era's official food of modesty, self-control, and questionable optimism. A fixture of women's magazines, diet plans, and every reduce while you produce article, the grapefruit is less a treat and more a penance. The house is quiet, the sunlight is polite, and you stare down at the blushing orb on your plate, wondering if today is the day you'll learn to enjoy it. The ritual begins with a serrated knife, and the kind of precision usually reserved for jewel thieves. You halve the fruit, careful to avoid spraying juice directly into your eye, though really that's inevitable. You marvel at the pastel segments, arranged in perfect symmetry by a universe that seems to value order more than flavor. You reach for the sugar bowl, the real hero of this operation. A careful, conservative dusting if you're playing by the rules, an avalanche if you're not. Sometimes, you even try the little grapefruit spoon with the jagged edge, designed by sadists, presumably to maximize pulp and existential crisis. Your first bite is always a shock, tart, bitter, puckering every muscle in your face. It's the culinary equivalent of getting caught in the rain without an umbrella. Your teeth ache, your eyes water, and you make the same face you made when your youngest child drew on the wall with lipstick. You consider adding more sugar, then decide you'd rather just eat the sugar straight. Still, you soldier on. Maybe you saw an ad that promised vitality and slenderness from a daily grapefruit. Maybe you're holding out hope that your palate will mature. Maybe you're just punishing yourself for not mopping the floor yet. This is not a snack that brings joy, it brings discipline. It brings a sense of order to your day, a little flag planted in the middle of chaos that says you're making good choices mostly. Meanwhile, the dog stares at you in disbelief. The children, if home, are suspiciously silent, and somewhere in the back of your mind you remember that there's half a coffee cake left from yesterday's church committee meeting, but you're committed. You eat the grapefruit, slice by slice, grimacing your way through each wedge and telling yourself that your body will thank you later, if not with health, then with a small burst of pride. Some days, you get creative, broiling the grapefruit with brown sugar, tossing it into a jello salad, or floating it in a punch bowl at bridge club, where it's largely ignored in favor of cheese straws. But mostly, it's just you, the fruit, and your steely resolve. Grapefruit is the kind of snack that says, I could have chosen joy, but I chose responsibility. It's a lesson in perseverance, in humility, in the enduring power of citrus to humble even the most confident housewife. When the last segment is gone and the last fleck of sugar has been licked from the plate, you toss the rinds into the trash, feeling both lighter and slightly resentful. You have survived the mid-morning snack with your dignity mostly intact. Tomorrow, maybe you'll indulge and choose a banana. Or maybe you'll just go straight for the coffee cake, sliver by sliver, promising yourself you'll get back to grapefruit next week. In the end, grapefruit is a rite of passage, a sharp, sour reminder that not every snack is meant to be enjoyed. Some are just meant to be survived. And in the 1950s kitchen, survival is always on the menu. You wield cans of cream of mushroom soup like a wizard with spells for casseroles, gravies, and anything that needs binding together, sometimes even families. There's no problem too big that it can't be drowned in condensed soup. If there's a single ingredient that holds the very fabric of the 1950s household together, it's not love, or patience, or even coffee, it's cream of mushroom soup. Lined up on your pantry shelves in gleaming towers, those red and white cans are more than mere convenience food. They're culinary insurance, emotional support, and an all-purpose solution to almost every domestic dilemma. Chicken dry? Add soup. Casserole bland? Soup. Need to stretch half a pound of hamburger to feed 6 people and the neighbor kid. You already know the answer. You pop the lid with a satisfying clunk. The faint chemical perfume of umami and optimism wafting out. It's a substance that is neither truly cream nor fully mushroom, but something alchemically engineered to be both, and to make everything else taste vaguely like itself. You upend the can and watch the pale, gelatinous blob slide out in one trembling mass, complete with mushroom pieces that look like they might have been diced with a ruler. The plop in the pot is the starter's pistol for what is about to become food. It is astonishingly versatile. A single can can become a sauce, a binder, a soup, if you actually add water, which you rarely do, or a stand-in for anything French-sounding in a recipe. The church cookbook has an entire chapter devoted to it, and for good reason. Your family may not know what bechamel is, but they'll eat anything if it's swimming in Campbell's. It's the foundation for tuna noodle casserole, the secret to chicken divan, the mysterious substance holding together your infamous pork chop bake, and the only thing standing between your pot roast and open rebellion. And let's not forget, it's a marriage counselor in a can. Got a tense dinner coming up? Guests who might judge your gravy? You pour in the cream of mushroom, stir until smooth, and hope everyone's feelings can be blended just as easily. Sometimes you think you could patch drywall with it. It's that reliable. But, as with all magic, there's a dark side. You're never quite sure what's actually in the can. The texture is unsettling. Silky but lumpy. Rich but suspicious. It coats everything it touches, binding green beans into submission and suffocating even the most rebellious meatballs. Over time, you begin to suspect that cream of mushroom soup isn't an ingredient at all, but rather a lifestyle. You buy it in bulk, you stash cans in every available cupboard. You exchange casserole recipes with friends in which the first 3 words are always combined, one can. Your children accept it as a fact of life. Your husband requests it by name, though sometimes you wonder if he'd recognize a real mushroom if it tiptoed across his dinner plate. Occasionally, in a moment of daring, you try cream of chicken or, heaven forbid, cream of celery. But these are pale imitators, destined to gather dust until you're out of the good stuff and desperate. In the rare moment you run out, there is panic. You send a child to borrow a can from Mrs. Olson next door, sparking a chain reaction of casserole crises up and down the block. Cream of mushroom soup is the culinary currency of the neighborhood. You could probably settle gambling debts or broker peace treaties with it. By noon, there are at least 3 casseroles quietly gelling in the fridge, all held together by your faithful friend in a can. You wipe your hands, survey your empire, and know that whatever else may go wrong today, rain, tantrums, burned bread, at least dinner will be creamy, savory, and above all, uncomplainingly edible. Because, in the 1950s, cream of mushroom soup doesn't just solve problems, it prevents them. Salad, in the 1950s, is a concept that lost its way. Lime jello, canned fruit, miniature marshmallows, and, if you're feeling rebellious, shredded carrots. The result is a quivering pastel abomination that looks like dessert and tastes like confusion. Welcome to the golden age of salad as a free-for-all. A lawless zone in the culinary landscape where sweet, savory, and straight-up surreal combine in ways no ancient Greek or Roman salad maker could have possibly foreseen. In theory, salad is about fresh greens and a crisp bite. In the 1950s, it's about how many things you can suspend in gelatin before your relatives start asking pointed questions about your mental health. The process begins with a box of flavored gelatin, lime, orange, or, for the truly daring, raspberry. You dissolve it in hot water, stirring while you reflect on your life choices. Then comes the fun part. You survey your pantry for anything remotely edible and with the structural integrity to survive suspension in a shimmering, wobbling sea of color. Canned pineapple chunks, maraschino cherries, diced pears, all dumped in with cheerful abandon. If you have miniature marshmallows, you're legally required to use them. If you don't, you borrow them from a neighbor, sparking a marshmallow arms race that sweeps the neighborhood. But you're not done. No, the real madness lies in what comes next. Grated carrots, cottage cheese, sometimes even olives or chopped celery. There is no logic. Only gelatin and opportunity. You fold these ingredients in, watching them slowly drift into the abyss like passengers on the Titanic, never to be seen in their original form again. You pour the concoction into a mold. Perhaps a ring, perhaps a star, perhaps the intimidating crown shape that's meant for special occasions but mostly just taunts you from the back of the cupboard. Into the fridge it goes, and you say a quiet prayer to the patron saint of refrigeration. Hours later, you invert the mold with a dramatic flourish, revealing your creation to the family. It jiggles with an eerie sentience, reflecting the kitchen light and the silent horror of your children. To serve a jello salad is to embrace chaos. You slice into it, and the marshmallows squeak, the pineapple oozes, and the whole thing surrenders to gravity in slow motion. Everyone is polite. They spoon it onto their plates, and the meal resumes as if nothing unusual is happening, even as everyone tries to figure out if the salad goes with the chicken or the pudding. Spoiler, it goes with neither. You reassure yourself that at least it's colorful, if not strictly necessary for survival. There's a secret competitive element too. The neighborhood potluck is a gladiatorial arena for jello salads. Mrs. Jensen's infamous seafoam delight is your chief rival, lime jello, whipped cream and crushed pineapple, topped with an aggressively cheerful cherry. Yours features carrots and a grim resolve. No one really wins, but the real prize is seeing whose salad is left untouched at the end of the evening, quivering in the corner like a silent protest. And so, salad in the 1950s is less about nutrition and more about spectacle, texture, and community tradition. It's a rite of passage for every housewife, a testament to resourcefulness, creativity, and the power of denial. When the meal is over, you scrape the remains into the trash, rinse the mold, and wonder what fresh horror you'll invent next time. Salad, after all, is whatever you can dream, suspend, and serve with a straight face. In this kitchen, that's not just a rule, it's a way of life. Casserole is where vegetables go to disappear. Layer after layer of starch, cream, and shredded cheese, topped with a questionable amount of cornflakes or crushed potato chips. If you can't see the peas, maybe you can't taste them. Welcome to the magic act at the heart of every 1950s kitchen, the casserole. This is not just a dish, it's a cunning operation. If the housewife is a magician, the casserole dish is her top hat, and somewhere inside it are all the vegetables her family claims to hate, now camouflaged under a landslide of melted cheese and crispy crumbs. The best part? No one's the wiser. At least, not until they bite into something unexpectedly green and start looking at you with betrayal in their eyes. The process begins with assembly, a word that feels intentional, because this isn't cooking so much as constructing a work of edible architecture. First comes a solid, comforting base. Rice, noodles, or maybe sliced potatoes, layered thick enough to provide plausible deniability for whatever lies beneath. Next, you select your protein: cubed ham, canned tuna, ground beef, or whatever survived last night's meat surprise. No need for judgment. Every casserole is a celebration of leftovers. Now it's time for the vegetable layer. But let's be honest. This is where you get sneaky. Canned peas, diced carrots, chopped celery, and even the odd green bean make their appearance, each one tucked into the strata of comfort food like spies at a cocktail party. You distribute them carefully, never in a single layer, too obvious, but scattered throughout, so no single bite is too risky for the wary eater. Some recipes call for mushrooms, but only if they're in the soup. No one has ever actually seen a fresh mushroom in a 1950s casserole. If you have a surplus of leftover corn, congratulations, you just invented country style. The next step is what the French would call sauce. But what you know is just a can of condensed soup, usually cream of mushroom, of course, and maybe a splash of milk for luck. You stir until it looks like something you'd find in a geology exhibit. Then pour it over the layers like culinary lava. This is the glue, the binding agent, the reason your casserole holds together when you cut a slice the next day. Bonus points for adding mayonnaise, always a wildcard ingredient that no one can explain. Then comes the crown jewel: cheese. Lots of it. Sometimes sharp cheddar, sometimes American. Sometimes whatever was on sale that week, and shreds with minimal resistance. Sprinkle generously, covering any trace of vegetables. This is both a kindness to your family and a practical necessity. The more cheese, the fewer complaints. But the true finishing touch, the 1950s flourish, is the topping. Some go for buttered breadcrumbs, but the real warriors use crushed cornflakes or potato chips. A layer of salty, crispy armor that transforms even the saddest green bean into a bite worth fighting for. The family hears the crunch, never suspecting the wholesome ambush beneath. Into the oven it goes, where the casserole bakes until bubbling, golden, and perfumed with the irresistible scent of dinner is ready. You let it rest, then serve it in big steaming scoops. At the table, your family marvels at how good it tastes, never realizing how many vitamins they've just unknowingly consumed. You watch with quiet triumph as your children devour seconds, too busy scraping up every last cheesy crumb to notice the lurking carrots. In the end, making a casserole is about love, ingenuity, and tactical deception. It's about finding a way to feed everyone, hide the vegetables, and call it a meal worth remembering. And if, somehow, a pea or two escapes detection, you just smile and say, "That's flavor." Because in the 1950s kitchen, victory is cheesy, crunchy, and always, always layered. Cookies are baked for every occasion: birthdays, bake sales, existential dread. You're locked in a never-ending arms race with other housewives who can make the softest cookie, the most symmetrical snickerdoodle, the least burnt batch. Spoiler: not you. The afternoon sun slants in through the kitchen window, dust motes dancing like sugar granules above the flour-dusted counters. It's baking hour in America, and the competitive tension is thicker than your best batch of dough. The radio hums softly in the background, the only witness to your latest attempt at domestic glory. You pull out your stained recipe card for Toll House cookies, the holy grail of 1950s desserts. Its ink faded from years of hopeful use and butter-stained fingerprints. There's a sense of ritual in every step, a sense that today, maybe today, the cookies will come out perfectly round, golden brown, and just the right amount of chewy. You gather your ingredients, measuring flour, sugar, and chips with mathematical precision. Somewhere in the neighborhood, another housewife is doing the same, her own measuring cups clinking in silent rivalry. The chocolate chips tumble from the bag, and you resist the urge to eat a handful, because every chip counts in the looming taste test. Butter and brown sugar cream together. Eggs are cracked with the authority of a seasoned pro. And vanilla is poured with the kind of generosity not listed in the instructions but required by the soul. Mixing is equal parts brawn and hope. You stir and fold, fighting the sticky dough as it clings to your wooden spoon, plotting its escape down your sleeve. The baking soda clumps, the flour flies, and the whole kitchen smells of childhood memories and stress baking. You drop the dough by spoonfuls onto a battered cookie sheet, mentally calculating the geometry needed for each one to bake at exactly the same rate. You flatten a few, round a few, and realize that uniformity is an impossible dream. Some will be too close together and merge in the oven, creating a super cookie that, if nothing else, will make you briefly famous among the under-12 crowd. The first batch goes in the oven, and you set the timer with the wary optimism of someone who has been betrayed by timers before. This is the suspenseful part, the waiting, the sniffing, the inevitable check at the halfway point, where you tell yourself you're just rotating the pan, but really you're peeking in to see if disaster is already unfolding. You wonder if Miss Ferguson's cookies ever spread into puddles, or if hers always turn out like the glossy magazine photos, perfect and infuriating. The timer dings, and you rush to the oven. Oven mitts at the ready. The cookies are, well, they're cookies. Some are underdone. Some are darker around the edges than you'd admit to anyone but your closest friend. And a few are strangely oblong. No two look alike. You try to remember if there's a lesson in this. Maybe there is. Maybe it's just that cookies, like children, are unpredictable and messy and occasionally set off the smoke alarm. You transfer them to a cooling rack, stealing a bite from the runt of the batch. It's warm, gooey, and instantly soothing. The children descend on the kitchen like a cookie-seeking SWAT team, snatching up the best-looking ones and leaving you with the experimental shapes for your afternoon tea. You survey the battlefield, flour everywhere, a kitchen that looks like it lost a fight with a bakery, and a plate of cookies that, imperfect as they are, will disappear by dinner time. Later, you'll pack a few in wax paper for tomorrow's lunches, maybe sneak a couple to your husband's study, and bring a batch to the church bake sale, where they'll be judged, admired, and compared to Mrs. Ferguson's. You'll lose, of course, because there's always someone with a secret ingredient, or just better luck. But as you wash up, licking a smear of chocolate from your finger, you'll realize you've won something anyway. A house that smells like love, the respect of the neighborhood children, and a moment's peace with a cup of tea and the best cookie of the bunch. In the arms race of afternoon baking, victory is measured in crumbs and smiles, and maybe just a little bit of existential dread. It's 3 p.m. and the children return, wild-eyed and hungry. Out comes more jello, sometimes in shapes, sometimes with fruit floating inside like prehistoric bugs trapped in amber. It's a marvel of science and a horror of flavor. Snack time in the 1950s household is not for the faint of heart. As the front door slams open and the sound of small feet stampede through the hallway, you brace yourself for the daily onslaught of snack demands. Cookies might have sufficed for the after-school crowd a generation ago, but now, in the atomic age, only the culinary wizardry of jello can truly impress. Jello, the undisputed champion of modern food technology, is here to save you from the tyranny of "I'm starving" and "what's for snack?" with a wobbly vengeance. You pry open the refrigerator door, revealing a veritable rainbow of molded gelatin concoctions, each one gleaming like it's radioactive, which, in this era, somehow feels like a selling point. There's a ring mold shimmering in lime green, a batch of cubes stacked in a parfait glass, and, for the truly daring, the iconic fruit cocktail surprise, where canned pears and maraschino cherries bob beneath the surface like prehistoric creatures awaiting excavation. The jello is served with pride and a faint sense of apology. The children gather, spoons in hand, drawn to the dessert's hypnotic jiggle. Presentation matters. Sometimes you get ambitious and use a copper mold, the kind that looks like something from a medieval torture chamber, but is really just for impressing the neighbor kids. You unmold it with a flourish, hoping the entire structure doesn't collapse into a sticky green puddle. If you're really showing off, you add whipped cream on top, maybe a handful of colored sprinkles. The children cheer. The dog circles, hopefully. You serve generous portions, watching their faces for signs of either delight or confusion. The first spoonful is always a surprise. The flavor, ostensibly lime, cherry, or orange, never quite matches the color. The texture is firm, cold, and somehow both slippery and dry. If there's fruit inside, it adds a further challenge. The soft squish of banana, the chewy resistance of a rogue grape, occasionally a marshmallow fragment surfaces. Having survived the gelatinous apocalypse, you reassure the children that this is a fun treat, even as you wonder when, exactly, society agreed that floating pineapple bits were appropriate for an afternoon snack. But jello is more than just a snack. It's a time capsule, a symbol of American ingenuity, and the easiest way to convince children they're living in the future. It requires no baking, only boiling water, patience, and a willingness to suspend disbelief and several objects in a brightly colored matrix. You recall the magazine ads, smiling mothers presenting their jello masterpieces to clean-faced, adoring children, as if every bite brings them closer to middle-class perfection. In reality, it mostly brings sticky fingers and a chorus of, "Is there more?" You watch your children devour their snack, cheeks flushed, eyes wide from the sugar rush, and marvel at your own resourcefulness. You've managed to feed a mob using little more than gelatin, canned fruit, and optimism. Somewhere in the background, the radio announcer extols the virtues of convenience foods and the promise of domestic bliss. You have to admit, for all its oddities, Jello does deliver on that front. It's quick, it's cheap, and it's the only thing everyone at the table will actually eat, except for that one kid who claims to be allergic to green food. When the last spoon scrapes the bowl and the last cube is inhaled, you gather the sticky plates, wipe up the Technicolor residue, and look ahead to dinner. Jello may not have revolutionized nutrition, but it has bought you 15 minutes of peace and a fleeting sense of accomplishment. In the grand circus of 1950s snack time, that's as good as a standing ovation. You pour a stiff martini or maybe a Tom Collins, because nothing says I survived another day like gin and vague citrus notes. You sip with the delicacy of a secret agent, contemplating whether you should have married for love or for access to better kitchen appliances. The hour is 5 o'clock. Maybe a bit before, maybe a bit after, depending on how honest you're willing to be with yourself. The children have retreated to their dens of homework and television. The husband will be home soon, his tie already loosening in anticipation. For now, you have the kitchen all to yourself, and with it, the freedom to become your own bartender, confidant, and therapist. The martini glass is cold in your hand, condensation beading as if in solidarity with your nerves. Making the perfect martini is a ritual. You chill the glass with a swirl of ice water, then dump it with the same flourish you use when tossing out the week's third failed Jello salad. Gin or vodka depends on your mood, your grocery budget, and how much you care about tradition. You pour with precision, 3 fingers, maybe 4 if the day has been particularly long. Vermouth is an afterthought, more suggestion than ingredient. A single olive drops in, or a lemon twist if you're feeling extravagant. The first sip is bracing, a bright, herbal slap that says, "Congratulations, you made it." If you're not a martini person, there's always the Tom Collins. Gin, lemon juice, a bit of sugar, and a splash of club soda, all stirred together with a stick of hope. The glass sweats in your hand as you lean against the counter, staring out the window at a world that, just for a moment, is quiet and under your control. The clink of ice in the glass is your soundtrack, soothing and familiar. You take stock of the day, the endless parade of meals, the mountain of dishes, the negotiations over vegetables, the wild-eyed snack hour. Every task has been completed, perhaps not perfectly, but at least with style. The martini is your medal, your tiny rebellion against a culture that expects you to smile through everything, even the disaster that was today's surprise casserole. You think about the ads in your favorite magazines, the glamorous women with perfect hair and perfect marriages, sipping perfect cocktails in perfectly clean kitchens. You look around your own kitchen, flour on the counter, sticky fingerprints on the fridge, a suspicious odor emanating from the trash, and raise your glass to reality. Sometimes you share the hour with friends, gathering in living rooms with highballs and hushed gossip. Other times it's just you, a solitary toast to making it through another day with your dignity mostly intact. You practice your James Bond impression, swirling the martini and whispering shaken, not stirred, though you know full well the only thing getting shaken around here is your patience. With each sip, the worries of the day soften at the edges. The laundry mountain becomes a gentle hill. The PTA potluck is a distant threat. And even the burnt cookies from this afternoon seem more like a charming anecdote than a defeat. For a few blissful minutes, you are not just a housewife, mother, or meal planner. You are the mysterious heroine of your own spy novel. Glamorous, unflappable, and a little bit dangerous. As the glass empties, the spell fades. The clatter of the front door signals the end of the magic hour. You take one last sip, savor the cool bite, and tuck away the recipe for self-care. Tomorrow, you'll do it all again, 3 meals, 1,000 decisions, and, if you're lucky, another martini at sunset. In the 1950s kitchen, cocktail hour isn't about escape. It's about resilience, ritual, and the quiet satisfaction of surviving the circus with a hint of style. Everything needs to be ready at exactly 6 p.m., except nothing ever is. The oven runs hot, the roast is still frozen, and the pressure cooker hisses like it's plotting your demise. Your only hope is to distract everyone with more dinner rolls. Welcome to the witching hour of the 1950s kitchen. A time when the entire house seems to hold its breath, waiting for dinner to materialize on the table as if conjured by sheer force of will. The expectation is clear: dinner at 6. Not 5:59, not X01. It's a time set in stone, as sacred as church on Sunday or jello. Oh, salad at potluck. The pressure is palpable. Somewhere in the background, a clock ticks with the authority of a judge at a parole hearing. You, meanwhile, are locked in hand-to-hand combat with the appliances, the groceries, and your own mounting sense of doom. It always starts with hope. You planned ahead, the recipe is selected, the ingredients measured, and you even remembered to thaw the meat, at least you think you did. Yet somehow the roast is still icy at its core, laughing at you from the baking dish. You crank the oven higher, hoping for a miracle, and tell yourself you can make up the time elsewhere. The potatoes will cook faster, you reason. The peas are from a can, and nothing bad ever happens to canned peas. The real wild card, though, is the pressure cooker. It's a shiny metal relic that promises efficiency but delivers suspense. Every time you use it, you feel like you're defusing a bomb. It hisses and clatters on the stovetop, steam curling ominously, the occasional spurt making you wonder if dinner or disaster is about to be served. You peer at the pressure gauge, silently negotiating with the kitchen gods. Please let it be done, and please don't explode. Meanwhile, the oven seems to have its own agenda. Some nights it bakes with volcanic fury, blackening the rolls before the chicken is even warm. Other nights it slumbers, refusing to heat anything past a gentle sauna. You try to recalibrate, shifting racks, covering things with foil, but the results are always unpredictable. The only thing consistent is that nothing is ever ready at the same time. The kitchen fills with competing smells: overbaked biscuits, slightly singed onions, and something you can't quite place but hope isn't a sign of electrical trouble. Your husband pokes his head in, checks his watch and asks, "Is dinner almost ready?" with the innocent curiosity of someone who has never fought a roast in open combat. The children circle like small sharks, hunting for snacks and making dinner prep feel like a round of culinary dodgeball. You deploy your secret weapon: dinner rolls. There is no problem in the world that cannot be at least briefly distracted by a warm, fluffy roll. You offer them liberally, like peace offerings to a restless crowd. The family descends, rolls disappear, and, for a few minutes, the noise level drops to a dull roar. Meanwhile, you orchestrate the final flurry, mashing potatoes with frantic energy, stirring the gravy until your arm aches, and praying the pressure cooker will release its captive stew with all pieces still intact. At last, you call everyone to the table, setting down the main event with a flourish that belies the chaos it took to get here. The food is piping hot, or tepid, but at least it's present. You smooth your hair, wipe your brow, and slip into your seat, knowing that no one will ever appreciate the ballet of chaos that got dinner onto the table. But that's the secret heroism of the 1950s housewife, making it all look effortless, even when the kitchen timer is the only thing not on your side. Dinner may not be perfect, and timing may be a myth, but as the family digs in, you allow yourself a private moment of triumph. Tomorrow, you'll try again. Same time, same place, same pressure cooker showdown. Because in this kitchen, dinner isn't just a meal. It's a daily miracle, timed down to the last bread roll. It's time for fine china, the good silver, and doilies. Always more doilies. You're supposed to fold napkins into elaborate shapes, but yours look like defeated origami. You light a candle for ambiance and hope the dog doesn't eat it. Setting the table in a 1950s home isn't just a step in dinner prep, it's a ceremony. The kind that comes with its own unwritten rulebook and a quiet sense of dread. Every evening, as the kitchen timer ticks and the last casserole cools, you assemble the sacred arsenal. The good dishes reserved for guests, holidays, and nights when you need to prove to yourself, or your mother-in-law, that you can be fancy. Each plate is edged in gold, each fork heavy and reassuring. You polish them with the same intensity as a medieval knight buffing his armor before a joust. Then come the doilies. Nobody is quite sure when or why doilies became the universal sign of domestic achievement, but here they are, multiplying like rabbits in every drawer and linen closet. There are large doilies for the serving platters, dainty ones for bread plates, and even rogue mini doilies sneaking onto the butter dish. They are crocheted, tatted, embroidered, and in at least one instance, melted slightly after an unfortunate run-in with the iron. You layer them under everything, knowing full well that after dinner you'll be shaking them out like dusty snowflakes in the backyard. Next, the napkins. The magazines show napkins folded into swans, roses, and elaborate fans. Yours, on a good day, resemble a vaguely flattened tent, sometimes a wilted sailboat. You attempt to follow a diagram, but by step 3, it's just you versus a stubborn square of fabric and a rapidly fading will to live. You tuck them hopefully beside each plate, promising yourself that tonight, nobody will notice your origami defeat. The table must be set just so. Forks to the left, knives and spoons to the right, glasses poised above the knife in a neat diagonal, salt and pepper shakers, always together, standing like tiny sentinels at attention. If you're feeling ambitious, you'll place a bread plate at each setting. A gesture that's equal parts hospitality and insurance policy against the inevitable timing mishaps in the kitchen. Ambiance is the last desperate flourish. You light a single candle because nothing says special occasion like risking a minor house fire. The candle flickers, adding just enough glow to hide the fact that your gravy boat is chipped and the mashed potatoes are less whipped and more resigned. The dog, sensing an opportunity, circles the table, eyeing the flickering candle with a look that says, "I've eaten stranger things." You make a mental note to keep him away from the centerpiece, a loose arrangement of plastic flowers that's been dusted, at best, twice this year. Finally, you stand back and take it all in. The mismatched plates artfully disguised by doilies, the battle-scarred silverware, the hopeful origami, and the glowing candle. The scene is more Norman Rockwell in theory than in practice. But it's yours. You've turned an ordinary table into a small stage, ready for the nightly performance of family dinner. The drama continues. You call everyone in. They shuffle to their seats, barely noticing your handiwork. Already distracted by the aroma of dinner and the squabble over who gets the last dinner roll. But you know that, for a moment, the table looked perfect, at least by the soft light of one defiant candle, and tomorrow you'll do it all again. Folding napkins, polishing forks, and laying out enough doilies to make your grandmother proud. In the grand tradition of 1950s housekeeping, the battle of the doilies is never truly won. But every night you set the table, you claim a tiny, beautiful victory in the ongoing war for domestic order. And that's something worth lighting a candle for. Meatloaf is the centerpiece, both meal and metaphor. You mix in ketchup, breadcrumbs, and existential angst. then serve it with a smile that says, "This is fine." The real mystery is how you'll make it taste different tomorrow. In the 1950s kitchen, meatloaf isn't just a meal, it's a performance. The recipe is simple, but the stakes are high. You start with a bowl big enough to double as a bathtub and dump in the essentials. Ground beef, maybe some pork if you're feeling lavish, an egg for structure, and a splash of milk for tenderness. Then come the breadcrumbs, which, depending on the state of your pantry, are either stale Wonder Bread crumbled by hand or, in desperate times, pulverized saltines, the binding power of carbohydrates and hope. Next, you add seasoning. But this is the 1950s. So seasoning means salt, pepper, and maybe a cautious pinch of onion powder if you're feeling scandalous. The true American flavor comes from ketchup, squirted generously into the mix and again smeared over the top, forming a glossy red glaze that will soon caramelize to a sticky, sweet armor. Sometimes you swirl in a dash of Worcestershire sauce, not because you love it, but because the label makes you feel cosmopolitan. You mix everything together by hand, the cold meat squishing between your fingers as you knead your way through another long day. Forming the loaf is an act of both artistry and denial. You shape it lovingly or resentfully into a squat oval, nestling it in the center of your best Pyrex dish. Into the oven it goes, filling the house with that unmistakable aroma. Nostalgia, comfort, and a faint undercurrent of desperation. You clean the kitchen as it bakes, scraping sticky flecks of raw meat from under your fingernails and pondering all the ways tomorrow's leftovers can be camouflaged. Serving meatloaf is a ritual in itself. You call the family to the table, slice generous slabs, and place them beside a scoop of mashed potatoes and a token pile of vegetables. The children prod the loaf with their forks, eyes narrowed in suspicion. Your husband, grateful for the familiarity, slathers his with more ketchup, oblivious to the delicate balance you've struck between flavor and frugality. You watch, holding your breath, as everyone takes their first bite. There are only two possibilities. It's good, or is this the same as last time? Because here's the secret. Meatloaf is never the same twice. Sometimes you sneak in shredded carrots or a spoonful of leftover rice. Other times, you swap out beef for turkey or add cheese in a moment of wild abandon. Each loaf is a tiny experiment, a culinary monologue about making do and making it work. You are the playwright, the actor, and, too often, the sole critic. But the true challenge begins after dinner. What to do with the inevitable leftovers? Cold slices for sandwiches, fried up with onions and slapped between two slices of white bread, crumbled into spaghetti sauce and billed as meat sauce surprise, diced into cubes for tomorrow's cowboy hash. You could write a book, 50 Ways to Disguise Yesterday's Meatloaf, and every housewife in town would buy a copy. Because meatloaf isn't just about getting through Monday night, it's about surviving Tuesday, Wednesday, and maybe even Thursday, if the family hasn't caught on yet. At the end of the day, as you wash the last plate and wipe down the table, you reflect on the humble magic of meatloaf. It's a meal that stretches, adapts, and endures, just like you. And, as you cover the leftovers and tuck them into the fridge, you give yourself a silent round of applause. You've pulled off another dinner, another illusion of order, another edible metaphor for resilience. This is meatloaf, both meal and monologue. And in the grand kitchen theatre, the show always goes on. Dessert is always dramatic. Gel, with canned whipped cream, pudding from a box, or, on wild nights, a cake from a mix. Everything jiggles. Everything is beige. The children are suspicious, but eat it anyway. This is the grand curtain call of the 1950s dinner, where every meal ends with a showstopper. if you consider a quivering dome of orange gelatin to be a showstopper. After the meatloaf is finished and the last peas have been negotiated, you reveal your pièce de résistance, dessert. The word itself is enough to make everyone sit up straighter and pretend they didn't just hide their vegetables in their napkin. It's the moment of anticipation, of family togetherness, and, in most cases, of baffling food textures. The jello makes its encore appearance, now topped with a crown of canned whipped cream that emerges from the nozzle with a sound like a minor explosion. The jello is always bright, sometimes shockingly so, defying both nature and common sense. Lime green, neon orange, or cherry red, occasionally all at once in improbable, gravity-defying layers. You've molded it into a ring or a loaf, and sometimes there's fruit lurking inside, pineapple, peaches, or even, in a moment of wild abandon, shredded coconut. The children poke at it with spoons, eyes wide, waiting for it to stop jiggling so they can dig in. If it's not jello, it's pudding from a box, chocolate, vanilla, or butterscotch, whipped with a rotary beater until your arm feels like it's earned its dessert too. You pour it into thick glass bowls, letting it chill just long enough to develop the famous skin on top, that mysterious film that some children love and others treat like a culinary crime scene. There's a faint chemical undertone, but that's just the flavor of progress. You top it with a maraschino cherry, more for the aesthetic than for the taste. Every so often, when you're feeling especially daring, or when the ladies' home journal has arrived with a new recipe, there's cake from a mix. You marvel at the box's promise. Just add water and bake. It's a kind of alchemy, a ritual of convenience, and the results are always, well, passable. The cake is soft, spongy, and somehow less flavorful than its color suggests, but nobody complains. You dust it with powdered sugar. Maybe add a swirl of canned frosting if you're showing off. If you're really going all out, you might even slice up some bananas on top or drizzle canned fruit cocktail over the whole thing, turning a simple sheet cake into a tropical delight. Or at least, that's what the recipe card says. As dessert is served, the kitchen transforms into a theater of the absurd. The children eat with the wary enthusiasm of people who have seen too much. You glance at your husband, who is quietly grateful for anything sweet and not green. The dog waits patiently under the table, hoping for a stray spoonful of whipped cream or a rogue piece of cake. Conversation resumes, laughter bubbles up, and for a few sweet minutes, everyone is happy. Or at least distracted from the memory of canned peas. You clean up with a smile, knowing that dessert has achieved its purpose. It's brought everyone together, ended the meal on a note of sugary harmony, and, most importantly, distracted your critics from the meatloaf's hidden vegetables. As you wash the last jiggly dish, you remind yourself that in this kitchen, drama isn't reserved for dinner. It's served right up to the final spoonful. The grand finale might be beige, it might be neon, and it might defy the laws of physics, but it's always a hit. And tomorrow, the show will go on, one wobbly masterpiece at a time. Dinner conversation is part meal, part cross-examination. The husband wants quiet, the kids want ketchup on everything, and you're negotiating a peace treaty between peas and mashed potatoes. Someone cries, it's probably you. Every evening in the 1950s, the family dinner table transforms into a dramatic arena. The dishes are set, the candle is bravely flickering, and you're girding yourself for the nightly performance that is dinner conversation. The moment everyone sits down, battle lines are drawn, not just over vegetables, but over everything from etiquette to current events to who got the bigger slice of cake. Your husband, fresh from work, settles in with the kind of weary sigh that only a pressed shirt and a full plate can inspire. He prefers dinner quiet, or at the very least, unaccompanied by the sound of sibling warfare. This, of course, is an impossible dream. The children, powered by sugar and unbridled energy, see dinner as a chance to air grievances, challenge authority, and create a Jackson Pollock painting with their mashed potatoes. They demand ketchup, and not just a dollop, no, an avalanche poured over meatloaf, peas, and sometimes, with horrifying defiance, even the jello salad. You, caught in the crossfire, try to maintain order. Sometimes it works. More often, you're just the referee, occasionally whistling for a timeout with the threat of no dessert. Questions fly across the table. How was school? You ask, trying to appear casual. Answers range from monosyllabic grunts to endless stories about who traded, whose sandwich, and which teacher has the best shoes. Your oldest launches into a detailed retelling of gym class injustice. The youngest refuses to eat anything green and stages a minor rebellion by hiding peas under the rim of the plate. Your husband, in a rare display of alliance, quietly slides his own vegetables to the edge of his plate, hoping you won't notice. You notice. The etiquette wars escalate. Someone chews with their mouth open. Someone else wipes their nose on a napkin. The middle child makes a valiant attempt to balance a spoon on their nose, then loses interest and launches a campaign to secure the last dinner roll. You negotiate with all the subtlety of a United Nations delegate. If you eat 3 more peas, you can have another roll. The rules are arbitrary and changeable, subject to the whims of maternal fatigue. Just when it seems the chaos will crest, the dinner table turns into a courtroom drama. Who left their bike in the driveway? Why is there a frog in the bathroom? Did anyone feed the dog? You field confessions, denials, and wild accusations. Every question leads to another, and soon it's less a conversation and more a cross-examination with mashed potatoes as Exhibit A. Someone is on the verge of tears. It might be the youngest, it might be the dog, or, on particularly trying days, it might be you. The pressure cooker on the stove has nothing on the pressure in this room. Some nights, you attempt to steer the conversation toward loftier topics. What did you learn today? Did you help anyone at school? Sometimes, this works. More often, you end up hearing about a glue-eating incident or a scandal involving a swapped lunchbox. At least everyone is speaking, which you tell yourself is a victory. As dinner winds down, dessert is brought out, an edible ceasefire. The children rally, laughter replaces squabbling, and even your husband softens, making a joke about his own childhood dislike of peas. You allow yourself a deep breath, a small smile, and a moment of relief. The inquisition is over, at least until tomorrow. You clear the plates and reflect, not without irony, that the dinner table may be the ultimate test of endurance, diplomacy, and grace under fire. Some families pray before meals. You pray for peace, patience, and a night where no one cries, including you. And when the table is finally empty and the house quiets, you give yourself credit. You survived another round of the dinner table inquisition. In the 1950s kitchen, that's as much a triumph as any home-cooked meal. After dinner comes round 2 with the dishpan. Pots, pans, utensils, and that one casserole dish that no amount of scrubbing will ever save. You find solace in the sound of running water and the fleeting hope of clean counters. This is the twilight ritual of the 1950s kitchen, the part they never show in magazine ads. The meal has been served, the battles have been fought, and the table is littered with the remains of victory. Crumpled napkins, gravy-smeared plates, forks teetering on the edge of abandonment. You eye the devastation with the resignation of someone who has been here before, knowing that the real work is only just beginning. No machine will save you now. The dishwasher is a rumor from the future, a rumor you're pretty sure you started just to keep your hopes alive. You stack the plates, scrape the leftovers into the trash, and face the casserole dish with the steely determination of a seasoned warrior. The cheese has fused with the ceramic in a bond no mortal should ever try to break. You soak it, hoping the laws of physics will take pity on you. Into the hot, soapy water it goes, accompanied by the cutlery, serving spoons, and every glass in the house. The children, full of dessert and new energy, scatter like marbles before you can conscript them into service. Your husband claims dishpan hands, a mysterious ailment that seems to strike only when the kitchen is at its messiest. The rhythm of cleanup is strangely meditative. The running water drowns out the background chaos. Children arguing about TV privileges, the dog barking at a phantom, the radio murmuring about the wonders of modern living. The dishpan fills with clouds of bubbles, your hands growing prunier by the minute. There is a certain satisfaction in reclaiming order. Plate by plate, fork by fork, each clean dish placed on the drying rack is a small, shining victory. You wipe away gravy, dislodge peas from spoons, and fish out that one lone noodle that always seems to escape. Every so often, you hit a particularly stubborn pan, a relic of tonight's meatloaf or last night's chicken bake. You scrub, you soak, you mutter threats. The sponge loses its will to live. The dish towel waves a white flag. Still, you persist. This is your Everest, and you will not be conquered. When at last the pan yields, you hold it up like a trophy, catching the kitchen light as if to say, "You have not defeated me. Not tonight, casserole. The counters are next." You swipe away crumbs, sticky patches of spilled jello, and the strange constellation of mystery spots that defy explanation. You return the salt and pepper shakers to their posts, wipe down the stove, and stack the now clean Tupperware with the pride of a puzzle master. There is peace in a gleaming counter, even if it only lasts as long as it takes someone to ask for a glass of water. In this moment, you pause, stretch your aching back, and savor the rare, shining silence of a kitchen restored. The world outside continues on, but here, for a brief spell, there is order. Clean surfaces gleam, the dishpan is empty, and the casserole dish is, well, cleaner, if not spotless. As the family drifts in to say goodnight, you bask in your small accomplishment. The kitchen is ready for tomorrow. The chaos has been tamed, and you found a fleeting moment of calm at the end of the never-ending sink. In the 1950s, it's not just about keeping a clean house. It's about surviving the cycle, finding grace in the grind, and, just maybe, discovering that hope, like soap suds, can be renewed each night. Midnight comes. You tiptoe to the fridge for a forkful of cold casserole, eaten in silence, staring into the middle distance. This is the only time the kitchen is truly yours. Tomorrow, you'll do it all again. There's a special hush that settles over the house after everyone else has gone to bed. The only light is a soft rectangle spilling out from the open fridge, illuminating shelves lined with glass milk bottles, half-empty jello molds, and the inevitable Tupperware mystery stack. The day's battles, meatloaf, peas, doilies, and dinner table diplomacy, are behind you. The kitchen, which all day has been a crowded stage for hungry children, clattering pots, and the ceaseless radio, is finally empty. It's your sanctuary, your confessional booth, and tonight, the only absolution you need comes in the form of yesterday's casserole. You slip the fork from the drawer as quietly as possible. No sudden movements. The last thing you want is to summon a child with claims of nightmares or a husband in search of just a little something sweet. This is your moment, and you defend it fiercely. The fridge's cool air whispers against your face as you scan the shelves for the prize. There it is. The Pyrex dish, its plastic lid slightly askew, a patchwork of whatever the week had to offer. Noodle, cheese, rogue pea, the memory of last night's ambition. You don't bother with plates, not now. You lift the lid and dig in, carving out a bite of casserole cold enough to numb your tongue and satisfying in a way hot food never is. It's a ritual of rebellion and relief, a small act of self-care in a world where the self is usually at the bottom of the priority list. The flavors have mingled overnight, becoming something more complex and somehow more honest than what was served at dinner. The crunch is gone from the topping, The cheese has solidified into a new geological layer. But you don't care. Each bite is as much about the silence as the food. There's something deeply comforting about the midnight snack. For once, there are no eyes on you. No commentary about vegetable content. No side-eye about the third helping, no performance. You stand in the kitchen, hair wild, bathrobe knotted, fork in hand, and allow yourself the rare luxury of eating purely for pleasure. You can linger, breathe, and let your mind wander, replaying the day, making tomorrow's lists, or simply zoning out in a haze of exhaustion and gratitude. Sometimes, the cat keeps you company, circling your ankles, hopeful for a morsel. Sometimes, you simply lean against the counter, chewing slowly, staring at the linoleum tiles, and wondering how many times you've stood in this very spot. The midnight kitchen is a time capsule. Echoes of laughter, faint traces of cinnamon from afternoon baking, and the steady promise that, come sunrise, it will all begin again. When you're done, you slide the fork into the sink, quietly, so as not to disturb the fragile piece, and click the fridge shut. You pad softly back through the dark house, tiptoeing around creaky floorboards. In your heart, you carry a kind of satisfaction that can't be measured in calories or chores completed. It's the knowledge that for a few stolen moments, you existed for yourself. Tomorrow, the kitchen will be a battleground again. Eggs and bacon at dawn, bologna at noon, a new casserole for dinner, and the endless cycle of cleaning and planning. But tonight, for one quiet, chilly moment, you're the master of your domain, keeper of the cold casserole, and guardian of the late-night snack. And as you slip back into bed, the world at last quiet, you know you're ready to do it all again, not because you have to, but because you always do. Bread is a staple, but also a daily challenge. You choose between fluffy white slices that are so soft they collapse under the weight of butter, or homemade loaves that double as doorstops. Toasting bread is an art form. Half the time you end up with something you could use to sand furniture. Either way, you serve it with a smile, pretending the smoke alarm is just a modern dinner bell. Welcome to bread in the 1950s, the edible tightrope walk that runs through every meal, snack, and late-night fridge raid. The pantry is lined with loaves in wax paper, promising enriched and fortified and other reassuring words that mean almost nothing. The local bakery's dense rye or the neighbor's prize-winning sourdough is for special occasions. For everyday eating, there's Wonder Bread, so soft, so white, it almost glows in the dark. Kids love it because it compresses down to the size of a marble in a lunchbox, and adults love it because it never goes stale, or at least not in this decade. But every so often, duty or curiosity calls for a homemade loaf. You roll up your sleeves armed with a packet of yeast and optimism. The instructions in the church cookbook promise a perfect crumb, but you suspect the recipe is written more as a test of character than an actual guide. The dough is sticky, the kitchen is drafty, and you spend an afternoon kneading, rising, and wondering if you're creating bread or a foundation stone for future construction. The result, 9 times out of 10, is a loaf so solid it could withstand a siege, or at least prop up a wobbly table. You slice it anyway, slather it in margarine, and present it at dinner like the trophy it is. Someone gnaws at the crust, someone else asks for more butter, and everyone, mercifully, is too polite to mention their jaw. The real adventure comes at toasting time. The toaster, a hulking chrome relic with a mind of its own, is both friend and foe. Set the dial to light, and the bread emerges untouched, still doughy and confused. Set it to dark, and you get charcoal slabs with smouldering edges, perfect for scraping with a butter knife or hiding under an avalanche of cinnamon sugar. There is a narrow, secret setting, known only to the toaster itself, where the bread comes out golden, crisp, and edible. Finding it is the 1950s housewife's equivalent of winning the lottery. Toast is more than breakfast. It's a universal currency. It cushions runny eggs, supports open-faced sandwiches, and acts as a delivery vehicle for everything from peanut butter to chipped beef in white sauce. It's comfort food, even when it's black around the edges. In emergencies, you learn to camouflage the flaws. Jam covers the overdone bits, butter hides the dryness, and for the truly burnt, there's always the old trick of French toast for supper, drowning your mistakes in eggs and syrup. Bread also occupies a strange social place. If you serve store-bought, someone will sniff about real baking. If you go homemade and it's heavy, someone else will reminisce about their grandmother's lighter-than-air rolls. There's no winning. Instead, you learn to laugh, slice, and serve with a straight face, offering bread baskets piled high and never letting on that you were one-time a mishap away from baking a brick. By the end of the day, whether the bread was white, wonder, or burnt beyond recognition, it's all been eaten. Plates are wiped clean with crusts, midnight snacks are built from odds and ends, and peace treaties at the dinner table are sealed with an extra piece passed quietly to the family holdout. The bread basket is empty, and your secret is safe, until breakfast tomorrow, when the battle begins again. It's a holiday, which means 3 days of advance panic. The turkey is always suspiciously frozen. The cranberry sauce comes out in the exact shape of the can, and someone is definitely crying in the pantry. Possibly you, possibly the dog. Every dish is covered in either gravy or existential dread, and dinner is served precisely 1 hour later than planned. Welcome to the highest stakes cooking event of the 1950s household, the holiday feast. It's part culinary Olympics, part stress test, and part family therapy session conducted in aprons. It all begins with the bird, a massive, frosted monument to tradition. Despite a week of reminders and at least 3 articles clipped from Good Housekeeping, you inevitably forget to thaw the turkey until it's almost too late. There it sits, a 10-pound poultry iceberg, mocking your confidence and sending shivers through your meal plan. You try every thawing method known to housewifery. Water bath, counter defrost, desperate prayers to street Julia Child. Still, the core remains rock solid, an unyielding chunk of poultry that laughs in the face of science. Meanwhile, you attempt to distract yourself and everyone else with a parade of side dishes. Mashed potatoes, mountains of them, whipped into submission. Stuffing that started life as stale bread, celery, and the remains of your will to live. Green bean casserole, engineered for maximum creaminess and topped with fried onions from a can. If it isn't covered in gravy, it's at least covered in foil, waiting its turn for the oven. Then comes the cranberry sauce, a holiday classic in its purest, most unrepentant form. You tip the can upside down and watch as it slides out with a majestic slurp, retaining every ridge and dimple from its aluminum mold. Nobody actually eats it, but it's there for the ritual and the photograph. Next to it, jello salad shivers with nervous energy, unsure if it's a side or a dessert. The kitchen transforms into a war zone. Every burner is in use, every bowl balanced atop another, and every family member tasked with a job, no matter how minor. Someone peels potatoes, someone else slices rolls, and the dog hovers hopefully for scraps. The phone rings with relatives announcing their early arrival, or the oven timer shrieks, or both at once. You duck into the pantry for a moment of solitude and maybe a tear or two, whether from onions, stress, or existential questioning is anyone's guess. Against all odds, the turkey eventually yields. You wrangle it into the roasting pan, stuff it with sage and celery and hope, and slide it into the oven with a prayer that it will cook through before the guests start rattling their silverware. The aroma fills the house, drawing everyone into the kitchen, noses in the air, stomachs rumbling, and patience running thin. Timers go off at random intervals. The gravy threatens mutiny, and someone always knocks over the salt shaker. When dinner is finally served, an hour late, minimum, it's a spectacle. Platters of turkey, golden or slightly singed, bowls of potatoes, rivers of gravy, and every guest jockeying for a spot at the good end of the table. Children squabble. Adults reminisce, and everyone pretends they aren't silently judging your stuffing. The food is hot, the conversation warmer, and the collective exhaustion melts into a few moments of shared delight. Even the cranberry sauce gets a respectful, if confused, glance. By the time dessert appears, pie, always pie, sometimes store-bought, sometimes an act of pie-related heroism, you're too tired to care about perfection. You accept the compliments with a weary smile, and the knowledge that, once again, you have survived. The kitchen is a disaster zone, the leftovers are already multiplying, and you promise yourself you'll never cook this much again. Until, of course, next year, when you'll do it all over, because nothing says love quite like gravy, panic, and a turkey that never really thaws. You've been drafted into the PTA potluck, which is less about community and more about who can bring the most show-stopping, borderline terrifying casserole. There's always at least one salad with pretzels and Cool Whip, and a dessert so sweet it could be classified as a chemical weapon. You scan the table, wondering which dish is safe and which one is a crime against humanity. This is not a mere dinner, it's a suburban gladiator match, where the kitchen savvy and the mildly unhinged do battle with spatulas and Pyrex. You spend days flipping through your church cookbook, desperate for a recipe that's impressive but not so complex it will expose you as a fraud. The stakes are high. The other mothers arrive in waves, toting covered dishes wrapped in aluminum foil and a steely glint in their eyes. You walk in, balancing your casserole with a smile so tight it could snap a toothpick, already scanning the crowd for Mrs. Whitley and her infamous upside-down tuna surprise. The table groans under the weight of culinary ambition. Casseroles take center stage, each one vying for attention. Tater-tot towers, lasagna layers higher than your hopes, and casseroles topped with everything from cornflakes to crushed potato chips to those neon-orange fried onions from a can. You spot at least two salads that aren't salads at all. One is a mound of green jello, the other is a suspicious swirl of whipped topping, pineapple, and, for some reason, pretzels. Someone always brings a dish that looks like it belongs in a science museum. Last year it was ham loaf à la mode, which still haunts your dreams. There is strategy to the potluck. You wait until a few dishes have been sampled before choosing your moment. You want your casserole, carefully layered, cheesed, and crisped on top, to be warm and intact, not reduced to a sad puddle by the time people get to it. You slip it onto the table with practiced nonchalance, quietly nudging aside the more questionable contributions and staking out a spot next to the most popular dish. Presentation counts. You dust the top with a final flourish of paprika, praying no one notices the scorched edges. The PTA members circulate, plates in hand, pretending to be gracious but really keeping mental score. Mrs. Ferguson samples everything, nodding solemnly at the good, raising an eyebrow at the experimental. The children are less discerning. They load up on the marshmallow salad, the pudding, and anything with rainbow sprinkles, ignoring the main courses except to poke them and ask if they're spicy. Somewhere in the chaos, the principal sneaks a second helping of your casserole, and you feel a tiny, fleeting rush of victory. For a moment, you are queen of the Pyrex jungle, but victory is fragile. The desserts are the final, sugary showdown. There's always at least one dish that glows with unnatural brightness, possibly due to a chemical reaction with the frosting. Someone brings cherry delight, which you suspect contains more Cool Whip than actual fruit. Another contender serves fudge, so dense it could anchor a ship. The judging is silent, but fierce. Compliments are doled out with restraint, so creative. How unusual. You must give me the recipe, all code for. I would never make this at home. When the event winds down, you reclaim your empty dish, or hide the barely touched remains of your new recipe. Swap polite post-mortems with the other cooks, and agree to never speak of what happened to the carrot pineapple casserole. Your casserole may not have been the best, but at least it wasn't the worst. That honor goes, as always, to the experimental salad that nobody touched, not even the principal. You go home exhausted, a little proud, and a little mystified by suburban culinary arms races. The PTA potluck is over. Until next time, when you'll once again risk it all for casserole glory, questionable salads, and a taste of small-town immortality, you stare at the pressure cooker, a chrome-plated bomb from the future. Instructions are vague, and the consequences for failure are dramatic. Either dinner in 15 minutes, or an eruption of beef stew that paints the ceiling. You stand by nervously as it hisses and rattles, calculating escape routes in case things go sideways. This is not just cooking, this is high-stakes engineering. The pressure cooker is the single most intimidating gadget in the 1950s kitchen. A shiny artifact that sits on the counter like a ticking time capsule from an advanced and mildly hostile civilization. Magazine ads promise it will revolutionize dinner, saving hours and infusing every bite with flavor. In reality, it's more like strapping your pot roast to a rocket and praying for a safe landing. The user manual, if you can find it, is written in a blend of technical jargon and vague warnings. Do not overfill, do not underfill, stand clear when releasing steam unless you wish to be exfoliated by gravy vapor. You assemble the ingredients with trembling hands. Meat, potatoes, carrots, a can of condensed soup for moral support, all sacrificed into the metal cauldron. The lid must align perfectly, sealing your dinner into a vacuum-packed chamber of hope and anxiety. As you lock it in place and twist the dial, you make peace with your fate and mentally review the fire escape routes. Some days, you consider leaving a note. If found, tell my family I loved them, and the stew was probably under-seasoned. As the pressure builds, the cooker comes alive with sounds that belong in a sci-fi movie. First a gentle hiss, then a full-throated rattle, steam curling out with menacing persistence. You eye the weight on top, watching it dance and spin like it's possessed by the spirits of every failed dinner past. The house grows tense. Children know to keep their distance, the dog slinks out of the kitchen, and you resist the urge to retreat behind an overturned baking sheet for cover. Timing is everything. Too little, and your meat is closer to sashimi than supper. Too much, and you risk liquefying the carrots and creating a flavorless beige sludge. You hover, timer in hand, like a nervous scientist about to split the atom. If all goes well, dinner will be tender, juicy, and, most importantly, quick. If not, well, you've seen the stains on the ceiling from last month's chicken experiment. The memory lingers, as does the faint odor of burned stew and panic. When the timer finally dings, you approach the release valve with reverence and caution. The escaping steam screams into the room, fogging your glasses and causing the curtains to billow. You keep your hands far, far away, using a wooden spoon to nudge the lever from a distance. Only when the hissing subsides do you dare to open the lid, one cautious millimeter at a time, half expecting to find dinner reduced to ash, or worse, staring back at you defiantly. But miracles do happen. You unveil a stew so tender, it practically falls apart under your spoon, vegetables holding their shape against all odds. You ladle it into bowls, the family drawn by the aroma and the promise of dinner without the usual weight. You serve with a flourish, brushing aside comments about why it smells so metallic and didn't the ceiling used to be white. In the end, the pressure cooker gambit is about more than just dinner. It's about courage, innovation, and the daily triumph of facing down household technology and emerging, mostly, victorious. As you wipe a bead of nervous sweat from your brow and survey your unscathed kitchen, you allow yourself a moment of pride. You are not just a cook. You are a kitchen engineer, a risk taker, a survivor. And tomorrow, when the leftovers are reheated the old-fashioned way, you'll breathe easy, knowing the chrome-plated bomb is safely back in its cabinet, at least until next Tuesday, when you'll roll the dice once again. So tonight, as you sink into your mattress, no springs poking you, no threat of rogue jello at midnight, maybe send a quiet thank you to the legions of housewives who came before. The women who wrestled with percolators, conquered gelatinous nightmares, and somehow survived an endless rotation of meatloaf, all while doing the work of 5 people and pretending they found it relaxing. Remember the struggle, the spectacle, the sheer comic bravery of anyone who had to plan 3 meals a day using only canned soup, bologna, and a prayer. For every casserole that held a family together, and every jello salad that threatened to break it apart, there was a stubborn hope that tomorrow's dinner might be just a little bit better, or at least a little less green. Because if there's anything history teaches us, it's that resilience isn't glamorous. It's about waking up before the sun, feeding everyone else first, and still managing to find a quiet moment for a cup of coffee before the next round of dishes. These women faced absurdity with a spatula and a straight face, armed with nothing but grit, ingenuity, and the world's most terrifying collection of cookbooks. So, as you tuck in tonight, safe from casserole catastrophes and liberated from the tyranny of the pressure cooker, remember to be a little kinder to yourself. Modern life comes with its own chaos, but at least you have options that don't require boiling tongue or defrosting a roast on the radiator. Maybe tomorrow you'll even cook something new, just because you want to, not because it's your job. History may be weird, greasy, and inexplicably gelatinous, but it's also proof that people can laugh, adapt, and survive anything. Even tuna salad in a ring mold. Good night, and sleep well.